to the podcast. It's your host, John Scardena. I am so excited to be back on this show again. It's been a small hiatus, if you will. I have Zack Borst with me, the man, the myth, the legend, EM Weekly podcast host, USAR member, firefighter, former this, former that, former everything, current Doberman, hopefully not former. Zack.
Breaking news. I'm out of here.
This is so awkward. How you doing?
I am doing great, actually. I'm pumped. I'm excited. There's new things afoot.
You were giddy this morning, and that was
giddy.
Fun to see. I had an hour and a half of sleep, and I'm trying to stay awake, and I get on this call, and you're like, let me show you this, and you're so full of energy, and I'm just like, survive. But that being said, there's a lot of good reasons, and that's kind of a teaser for everybody else later in the show of why you should be giddy and why you should be really excited about what you're doing. And so we can have that little teaser, but at the same time, you explore more of that on your podcast on EM Weekly, so make sure everybody check out EM Weekly's podcast about AI later. But for the sake of this podcast, we're going to keep it kind of to the broad spectrum of emerging technologies. And I want to frame it with personal experience and then bring Zack kind of into the conversation as he's going to have a lot of insight in here as well. So as you all know, I flew drones for FEMA. Yes, as FEMA, not as an adjacent to FEMA or as a mission assignment from FEMA, but as part of the National Strike Team, National IMAT West, as it used to be called. Now it's called RED. Several years ago during Hurricane Harvey and then wildfires and in California, and saw those amazing use cases. And what happened was when we got out there, now I'm not going to rehash the whole story for everybody, but essentially we found more homes faster than a 33-person team, and we had 2 of us in the field and 3 GISers working on it in the back end. And it was like exciting. I felt like I was on like the edge of technology, doing these amazing things. And what happened was it was torpedoed, and it was incredibly frustrating at the time to see this technology that could help out response, could help out emergency managers, and help out really survivors get better information faster that was just actionable. It wasn't opinion-based or wasn't writing it down on paper and trying to transfer that paper, but you could geospatially see it and mark it in real time. And yet, because of, how do you say, like the Whigs,
Luddites,
yeah, the former crowd, if you will, the crusties, and pushing back on it because 1, they were afraid of technology. 2, they would say things like it could replace jobs. It's like, so you'd rather, fulfill your selfish need in a temporary space and not help out tons of survivors faster. There was all these issues, and they torpedoed it. They absolutely killed the program inside of FEMA. And what they did is, because the use cases were already proven, it was in official FEMA documents and after actions, they had to do something about it. So they gave it over to passionate amateurs, as if you will, from another group, to go out there and fly for them. And the same problem happened. They got 1 billion photos, but not what we needed. And that's no discredit to them, right? Like, that's no discredit to the people who want to help out. But the technology wasn't used in its truest capability.
Yeah.
So with that background in mind, Zack, let's talk about AI, and to make sure that we are not so prideful in our field that we don't torpedo this, and we can also tread lightly, because it is, drones are cool and drones are still cool, but this is exponentially bigger, and somehow in some spaces could be exponentially more dangerous, right? For those crowds who are like, oh, AI. So how would you address the immediate concern of, I don't even want to test this out because of, emerging technologies? We don't really know what it can do. How do you overcome those fears?
Well, first, I got breaking news. Those people that were mad about drones are going to be just as mad about AI. And the people that were mad about drones were mad at me before when I was introducing social media as a tool in emergency management. Of course, it's the social media was the same thing. Like, it's a Pandora's box. Once we open it up, everything's out there and there's nothing we can do to stop it. But the reality is, technology is going to continue to evolve regardless of whether you are comfortable or you are interested in, learning it. And so because of that, you have to sort of stay on top of it. I would actually say, even if you're a Luddite, who doesn't like technology at all and wants to do things on paper, you still have to be aware of this, because around you, it's going to start to replace stuff. And that's sort of like what I've been messing around with it for. The example that I gave in my podcast was like a very specific, I was using it to just kind of test local resource management for like the single shop EM or a one person dispatch center to see if it could support it. But obviously there's organizations that are much bigger than us that are going to start loading this into all of their systems. So understanding how it works and its limitations and the challenges is going to be important regardless. And the evolution in the field, I think, is going to be significant. Like, drones was a better way of doing one thing. This is like a generational leap in technology. And I'll caveat all this in saying that, like, I call it AI. I talk about it as though it's AI. The reality is, like, a lot of this is what you call like a LLM. I think it's a learning language machine. I'm sure I've got that acronym wrong, but LLM, it's basically a chatbot, right? It's a fancy chatbot. It takes all of the data that's fed into it, and it's just really good at taking that and then using a natural processing language, I believe. This is like, I'm going to be so embarrassed when all the nerds are like, you're doing it wrong.
It's better.
I want to be, I want to be a AI practitioner. I'm not an engineer. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can. But I went from like 0 to 200 miles an hour in the last like 2 weeks on this, as everybody else is as well. But it's basically just an intelligent search engine that can take stuff and spit it out in a way that sounds more human-like. And the models are getting more advanced, even just in the last few weeks. Like GPT-4 is exponentially more powerful than the previous one, and they have a new one out live. I think it's called GPT Live, that actually pulls live data from the internet, the entirety of the internet. And there's Bard, that's a Google version. Bing is building it into it. Those are just sort of like fancy chatbots, right? AI is going to be built into a lot of different stuff. Predictive analytics to help you with alerting. It's going to be able to take, speaking of alert and warning stuff, like mass notification systems, you'll be able to type in a message and it'll automatically turn it into the 90-character WEA, the 360-character WEA, IPOS compliant, change it to languages in spoken language format, not just the direct conversion of like English to another language, which anyone who is a ESL speaker knows, like, English doesn't directly translate just because you use your language's words in the same English, framework. You have to actually make it work. AI is going to revolutionize that. But it is early. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, if there's bad data that's going in, there's going to be bad data that goes out. The systems are still training and figuring out how this is going to work. And there's a bunch of like dark side stuff too. It's going to absorb all the bad stuff that's on the internet. The, biases, racism, violent instructions, all of this stuff that a machine doesn't understand.
This is where those hats start to freak out a little bit.
Right. The morality and the ethics of using this, I think, are going to be challenging. And then I had a conversation with, an AI, pioneer within our field, who was sort of talking about just like, if you're not a good emergency manager, then AI is actually not going to augment you. It's going to make you probably much worse at your job, because you're going to use it as a crutch and you don't know any better, right? So you have to still have your expertise in the field. The way that I describe it, though, is it's not going to replace you. You're not going to get fired. It's not going to make you a better emergency manager. Like, you still have to know the field. It's like a mech suit that you're going to strap on, an intellectual mech suit, and it's going to make you more powerful. So the stronger you are, the more powerful you'll be with AI. Like, it's just going to like be a force multiplier for you. So I think that that's the strength right now. And the truth is, like, we don't even know what this is going to be used for in like 2 weeks. Like, I just made a stumbled across a discovery using the most basic AI model that I have access to, right?
Real quick, we're going to pause for this week's Disaster Tough endorsements. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at L3Harris.com right now. Okay, let's jump back in. And yet you did some incredible things with it.
Yeah.
And what we're referring to is a dispatching emergency services based off of different conditions. And
it was crazy.
EM Weekly's podcast on that.
Yes.
But I'm going to scale back just a little bit.
Okay.
Because we're talking about emerging technologies, if I can get that out.
Yes.
And all these conundrums of, what do we do, or what ifs, all the what ifs. The what ifs drives me nuts sometimes, but we get paid to do what ifs, so that's fine. Steve Johnson, when we were at a dynamic populations course in Atlanta last year, was talking to me about the British approach versus the American approach in military of training. And it's really stuck with me. And I think you and I have talked about it a couple times.
Yeah.
Sometimes what we do, and I've done this with myself, as soon as there's a new technology, I train to that new technology and not the basics. And so what they do is opposite, is they train you how to do it basic. And then once you master that, then they can give you the enhancements of the technology.
Yeah.
And you're saying the same thing in emergency management, is you have to still know how to do your job. And if you don't, no matter the tool, you're still not going to be very good.
Yeah.
At the same time, I hear people say, well, if everybody starts learning these technologies, if the EMP hits, that dreaded acronym that everybody doesn't want to talk about but loves talking about it somehow, somehow they won't be able to do their job.
Right.
And my question to you, and there's actually pros and cons here. Do you think, this is really, I'm seriously asking, do you think it'd be easier for someone in our time period to go back in time to the year 1700 and survive eventually? You know what I mean? Give them the right kind of tools. Or do you think that somebody from the year 1700, if they leaped to 2023, would be able to survive?
Whoa. That's some philosophical gymnastics I got to do. I would say it would be harder for me to go back because I wouldn't have the knowledge, right? I wouldn't know how to go and prepare a field for food, right?
But you would know that you would need to prepare a field.
Yeah.
Somebody gets up to here and they look at these bricks that we're holding, these shiny stones, and they're like, what?
So here's a good application.
All the magic.
Here's a good application though, that with someone from that, someone who absolutely has no idea how the internet works, but at least can articulate I want to learn something. This is another huge advantage and a tool that specifically the LLM model of AI do really well. You could say for instance, if you want to learn about, the EMP, why is EMP scary? You can say explain to me the EMP threat as though I'm an engineer. I'm a technical person and I want to know what exactly the the actual failing points within the system are going to be. But if I'm a lay user and I just need to know at its most basic core, I can ask it to explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, and it'll simplify it. That's the advantage of these natural language models. So that's where people who are not necessarily comfortable in it, this is something that I think is going to make it much easier to actually learn a lot of different technologies, right? So in IT, for instance, I worked IT the entire time that I was going to college. I worked in our call center. And then I actually supported an entire college as a student, the nursing college, to help them with all their IT. Basically, I was better at Googling than they were. That's really what it came down to, right? Yeah. This is going to essentially could replace a lot of technical support, because the machines are going to get smart enough to sort of Google the symptoms that you're putting in there, and you can ask it to explain it on a level. And in fact, I would say the reason that I was actually really good as an IT person was not necessarily, I had a technical background. I was a computer science major for a little bit, switched to a minor, and then eventually booted out and did geospatial stuff. But I was actually very good at taking technical information and explaining it in a simple way so that the person that was getting help understood what was wrong. Like, and a lot of my colleagues did not do that. They were geniuses, right? And they wanted to explain it like a genius did, or they just didn't have that sort of like capacity to translate it into something, or desire to, which is also an issue. We have a lot of people who are super arrogant when they have information and they don't want to give other people that information because they think it's below them.
And they haven't earned it. I had people do GIS. I did not have a GIS degree, and yet I was producing work faster and getting along better with ops and planning than they were.
Yeah.
But they knew so much more than me. And yet, like, when I'd ask them a question, they'd be like, how dare you? I got a degree in this. They're like, well, I just Googled it 5 seconds ago, and I found the answer. So
yeah, there's actually a process to this in like academics that it's called technology transfer, right? So one of the hardest things that an academic, like someone who is, devoted their life to research and understanding like these really specific things, like they are the expert in it, is simplifying it so that everyone can have access to it. And in fact, it's a huge fault of a lot of, the higher ed institutions. Like they might produce all this great information, but if it's not getting to the people who actually benefit from it, who cares, right? Like it's great that it's captured, it's been learned, the body of knowledge is growing. But there's Alan Alda, ironically, the guy from MASH, is like one of the biggest proponents for taking science and communicating it in a way that people can understand. And it's really hard for someone to do that because we're our own people, right? We've got our inherent biases, our sort of like ego that gets in the way, all this stuff. Technology doesn't, it has it for sure because we build the models off of information we're feeding it. So it's going to kind of inherently take some of that. But you can train it eventually to sort of not have the ego. It won't have the ego, like by default, and to try to remove as much of that as possible. That's actually, I think, one of the biggest challenges, and actually one of the biggest arguments for sort of like pumping the brakes on a lot of AI is like, we got to figure out the morality and ethics of it, at the same rate that we're releasing stuff, so that we're not injecting more crap into the world, right?
What book is that? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, how the robots are given personality and it's depressed or it has ego, doesn't want to answer that day. I would love that from AI. Like, nah,
it's
later.
I mean, that's so they do build that into. There's like social, AIs that are being developed for people who are like in nursing homes and stuff, who like maybe don't have 24/7 people there to keep them comforted, or just people who are depressed and just need to chat. And they found there's been research of like even basic chatbots, not that like from 10 years ago. Like I remember there was one that was feeding into a Facebook chat. And it was a research by, I think, Stanford. And it was a chatbot that someone could talk to and provide some basic information about, like, are you sad today? Are you going to do any, like, are you suicidal? Are you this? And it would chat, and then it would give you some basic prompts and responses. And, people were like, actually, this is kind of helpful. Like, I don't want to tell a person this, but I'm happy to talk to this chatbot. As these get more advanced, there's more functionality. I think right now, what we as an emergency managers need to do is figure out like how do we feed it specific data. So that's like where there's this program called a system called Forecast. Eric Cant, who was on my podcast, belongs to that. He's making a decision making model for AI within this, and they're feeding it specifically the stuff that we need to make critical decisions. So it's more granular and there's less sort of like all of it, but it's. For that purpose, it's really specific. And that's where you start to turn AI into like a tool, right? So there's like a hammer. And if your hammer or your only tool is a hammer, then every single problem looks like a nail, right? That old saying. And so trying to train different AIs for different things, I think is going to be more powerful. And then having like an AI that maybe decides which AI to use, or you have some process that like sort of determines like which AI is most effective for a situation, like that is going to be like the revolutionary part of this.
Revolution.
Yeah.
That's the word of the day, by the way, is revolution. Revolutionary, really.
Yeah.
So emergency managers looking to use AI. I mean, you talked a ton about chatbot, right? Like,
yeah.
How can chatbots help you out? So just hitting on the higher ed thing, there are some higher ed institutions like St. Louis University, where I teach, that are using ChatGPT and using OpenAI and trying to get students comfortable with. They still need to do their side of the house, but to use these assistants to help them go faster. And in the tabletop exercise that I just gave them out this week, there's injects. I don't know, probably less than every 30 seconds. I think I have a new inject for them because they have to accomplish a lot in their exercise. However, if they're not using every tool available to them, it will take them 10 hours to complete all the tasks required. But I already trained them saying, hey, like, this is how you ask the effective questions. This is how you come up with the models. This is how you, put in the right information so you can spit some stuff out. Case in point, in the tabletop exercise, I needed to show a letter, a fake letter from the governor's office asking a request from the PIO. And I just put into ChatGPT. I said, here's my disaster scenario. This is what we're looking for. Grammar perfect. It's concise, right to the point, but somehow also polite. And I was able to use that in my exercise as a prop, essentially, if you will. And so, like, even from like that kind of level of just making your exercises look, we're not even talking about building out the model. We're just talking about having an experience that is more robust and full and realistic, not just by your trusting your own gut, by saying, hey, let me put in some prompts here. And you can create exercises all the time for your team and for your stakeholders and compare that against reality. So, I mean, talk about a major tool enhancement for just getting things done faster.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the trouble with like academia is, of course, plagiarism and understanding. You still need people to be able to apply that knowledge. But until like, I think this is one of the challenges with any emerging technology, right? I'm sure like when calculators first started to appear, people were like, you can't use that. Like you're cheating, right? I mean, it's true. Yeah. A lot of schools are still,
test, I still had to write down this, show me how you came up with this answer.
But as we move towards like an approach towards education where you're allowed to use any tool within reason, like again, don't cheat, don't just copy and paste, but use it as a tool. And you pick the tool because you understand the concept enough that you know where you're trying to get, and you're going to reach to every tool possible to figure that out. I think is really important. And that's what, like, for me right now, that we're kind of like trying to do that with these different versions of AI and the LLMs and chatbots, whatever you want to call them, and learn like what is the value of this and how can we use it. And we're just so early on in this that we don't know. And so I think that makes people really nervous, but like, it's here. The Pandora's box is open, right? It's already here. So like where maybe SLU is willing to take advantage, I happen to be in a professional military education course run by another institution. And like, as soon as you log in, one of the first thing it says is like, we have algorithms that can detect AI use. And I'm like,
we put those parameters in there as well.
Yeah.
We just want them to learn the tool to be able to assist them.
But I'm like, I get it. Because ultimately, of course, it's data that's feeding it. So like, it's going to pull from other people's, intellectual property and all this other stuff. But to just be like, no, you're not allowed to use it is like the worst thing that you can do because it already exists. So like being, so what do they call it? Like there's my wife teaches STEAM classes, whichever, depending on where you are, it's called different things, but science, technology, engineering, math, and sometimes arts. So in that, they teach they're teaching kids basically how to use the internet in a way that is like morally correct, ethically correct, but not to be afraid of it, which is like what a lot of places teach. Like if you copy and paste out of this, you're going to get an F. Instead of being like, you absolutely can use whatever resources you need, but you have to learn how to cite them, and you need to understand like if this doesn't have a citation with it, it might be somebody else's copied from another spot. So understanding that. And what we're going to do is create students that are afraid to like access information and tools because they were basically beaten and saying like, don't use that. It's cheating, versus teaching them how to use it ethically and how to use it correctly, and to know there's limitations to it. Like it is literally just a computer. It's like the cloud, right? The cloud is not a cloud. It's just someone else's computer.
What?
So understanding how those systems work and the value of them and how to use them is going to be really, really important. But again, it is a new technology, so it is kind of scary for some folks who are like maybe not even caught up on the last technology, but they'll come around. I remember working with a bunch of fire chiefs in the early 2000s when I started, saying like social media is a thing. I guess that was like 2008, 2009. I don't remember when it really sort of took off. I made the first emergency or public safety Twitter account in the state of Vermont when I was an emergency management director for the town of Shelburne. And all these people were like, don't do it. Stay away from it. It's only going to cause you headaches. Like, do you want everyone to just have access to you 24/7? Like, imagine what the town people will do. And lo and behold, they stay engaged and they got interested in what we were doing, and we got more interest in the organization. And young people wanted to be a part of it because all of a sudden we're on social media, and that's where all the young people were. And so our department was pretty active and had a good membership while others were trying to die off. So by using these new technologies, you're setting yourself up for future success. And by not being afraid of them, you're not limiting them as a tool, but you just have to understand and recognize the limitations. And I think we're just not, most people are not in that position anyways, but because this is a very emerging technology, it's not really, all this stuff's been around since the 1950s, right? Machine learning is not new. It's just the natural processing language is new. And it's just kind of spinning up old scary stuff, but a lot of people are already comfortable with this. You have an Alexa in your house, or you're using Siri on your watch or your phone, all that stuff is AI.
This is a big tangent, but have you
Sure.
seen those gaming videos where the person, you can hear the like proximity chat?
Yeah.
And they'll say, Xbox turn off, and the other person will get locked on because they'll turn off their...
Yeah, I was trying to do that with the kids who are just really, really loud in like Rocket League, because I'm like, I don't need to hear you, man. You need to chill. Turn your mic down.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
But yeah, so it's a new thing. I'm like, it's the first time in a long time that I feel like we as emergency managers could like lead the way with this.
Absolutely, and we will. I mean, it's a fun opportunity at SLU to teach the students about how to do it appropriately.
Yeah.
And, we put all the, don't plagiarize, we check all that stuff too, but to learn how to use it as a tool for idea generation or to articulate ideas, incomplete thoughts that you have in order to build off additional ideas. And what I would tell the students is that, like, if it is not producing the answer you expect it to, you are not asking it or providing it correct information, the information you want, because you want it to be biased.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't use like OpenAI and ChatGPT to like ask you like what's the meaning of life, right? You should ask it like to help,
because you might get an answer and you might not be ready for it.
yeah. I'm ready. I was born ready. But the reality is, it's like, oh, I have a mount. Let's take a response, for example, right? And maybe for the last 2 minutes here, literally last 2 minutes, you can kind of explain what happened in your podcast. But like in a response, you get a mountain of tasks from everywhere, and you need to start organizing those tasks. And if you've put in all the right prompts and you've organized ChatGPT so it understands, like, when you put something in, it can automatically spit it out, it can dramatically enhance your capability to provide life-saving, life-sustaining support. And that's not about plagiarizing at that point, because you're not producing a paper. You're talking about your own thoughts are aggregated in a way that is, for other people. Imagine if you had, for example, this is going to be kind of a random tangent, just like this, you got this really kind of nasty email and you wanted to respond and you want to be like angry, so you could put all that information in ChatGPT and say, reorganize it so it's polite. Boom.
I mean, don't imagine, do it. You can do that right
that's
now.
What I'm saying.
Yeah,
you can literally do that. You can take you don't have to be, you're like, oh, am I passive aggressive in this response? Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm angry. Right? And so like there's all different kinds of ways to, like, how about a person who wants to respond to somebody who's very important and they're afraid that they're not going to look very professional, right? There's lots of different use cases that are not like change the world things, but can enhance your individual capabilities so that you're more effective in your own job. So with the last 2 minutes here, Zach, just kind of explain the use case of what people can get from your EM Weekly podcast episode.
All right, so very specifically, I was thinking about this for resource management because to me, it's one of the like most challenging parts of emergency management is taking accountability for systems, tracking where stuff is going, knowing when things are in service, out of service, they need to be refreshed, all of this stuff. Being able to, figure out work rest cycles for people in an incident, under different weather conditions, like we only assign like a couple people to the resource to the resource task within emergency management. Like you have logistics, and now with the different models, it might fall under something else. But like we don't devote enough attention to that to do it properly. So everything's slow. It takes a long time to figure out where your stuff is at, like what's tasked, what isn't, what types of resources are available. With a model like this and AI, you can feed it all the resources in whatever condition they're at, and then let it sort of start to track it. And then you as an emergency manager can start to figure out like, all right, I have this type of incident, and they're asking for this because they're trying to accomplish that. Instead of me being like, well, I interpret that as this, you can basically let the machine take all the information available, the weather, the conditions, the travel to and from that incident, and it's going to go through all of those resources and say, all right, maybe the best tool is up in the northern part of the state. It'll be there in 45 minutes, but actually because there's roads that are cut off there, it's going to take a lot longer. So we're going to get it from a town that's an hour away, but because there's a clear path, it'll get there first.
Yeah.
Early on in an incident, you're task saturated. You have everything you're just blasted with information. Humans don't process that very well, right? We have to start breaking it down into like little bits. And that takes a long time. 24 hours, 48 hours, maybe even longer for a huge, huge incident. Computers do that stuff all the time. That's the whole like beauty of a computer, right? Let the system take all that information and parse it into useful bits that you can start to accomplish. So, for instance, I'm just going to do this really quick. You feed a bunch of information, weather information, disaster reports, incident reports, statistics, knowns, unknowns, whatever you feed it into there and say, please summarize this so I understand what's going on. Takes all of that stuff. It's going to explain it in a concise way. This is what's going on. And there you go. You've got your ICS 201 done in like 2 seconds, right?
Can you
like
imagine? Like
you just get it in a very, very simple thing. And I think that again, the value is like the agencies that don't have the resources or the early on emergency managers and incident commanders who are just overwhelmed. This is where it's going to be the most powerful. Once you have everything in place, you probably have the people, know-how, knowledge, tools to make it work. We do that all the time, but that's not what saves lives. You save lives in those first 24, 48. I mean, the faster you can get this done, the more lives that are saved. So why would you not want technology to make that even faster?
The why not was so frustrating with me, going back to that full circle here with the drones.
Yeah.
It's like, why not? And every single answer I heard was fear, incompetence, afraid to lose my job, which goes back to fear, or honestly, willful ignorance.
Yeah.
None of them were actually like really great answers for like, we shouldn't do this. Somebody said, hey, they're going to shoot down all the drones. Well, I went out to multiple disasters in Texas and in California, Texas being the big one there. And guess what? Nobody shot it down. In fact, we had several people come and watch, ask questions, say this is really cool, especially as soon as we said, yeah, we're here to get the data as fast as we can because we want to help you. Like, oh, that's cool that you're using like this stuff to help us out. So like AI can do the same things, like these chatbots can do the same things. So just wrapping it up here for everybody in the episode, we just bombarded you with our biased opinion. We were the ChatGPT of why you should use AI today. But honestly, like go out there. There's a free version. I use the free version. Zach uses the paid version. And we're both accomplishing these amazing things for enhancement. Funny enough, what we should have done is done an outline of this episode on ChatGPT before we did that because we were kind of all over the place. But it's kind of fun to just think and explore and think what can happen with this. If you're listening to this episode and you have those feelings of fear or hesitancy, or you're wondering about the future, I would implore you, instead of just running away in the dark, kind of open the door a little bit, put in your email address. Don't, just try it out. A simple thing is my father-in-law, he had no idea what it did. And as a fun exercise, he understands paint and formulas for paint. And I said, put in a formula, or I said, ask it specifically a formula for paint. And he was like, oh my gosh, it came out with the exact formula. And then I said, ChatGPT, create 10 jokes based off of the 10 Commandments using Sun Tzu's language and references to Shakespeare. And it came up with these jokes, and my father-in-law was just like giggling like this little kid. And he asked for screenshots of my phone. He sent it to all his friends. He had no idea. And it can just do that. It can do that instantaneously. It's wild. Either way, have some fun learning about AI and ChatGPT and these sources. Get ahead of the curve. Allow it to help you out. Don't lean on it as a crutch. That's a really big fear that actually I have for it, for our field. But use it to enhance, like Zach said, for life-saving, life-sustaining. And make sure you like and subscribe and all the other things. Zach, what else should they do?
Yeah, just play with it.
EM Weekly.
Check out EM Weekly this week and last week. I've talked about it twice. And if you're I don't want to just talk to AI folks. I want to talk to AI folks specifically who have a public safety lean. I would love to get some experts on there so that, there is some technical analysis. I'm learning this, but I'm not a technical expert. I am a practitioner. I want to be like the tactician of AI. But I'm super excited about this, and I just think there's just so much potential. So much.
Is that going to be like your name?
What did I just say? Was it Tactician of AI? Yeah, sure. That sounds cool.
That actually
Maybe that's our new podcast. That's our new podcast, folks. Tactician of AI.
The Tactician of AI. We're starting a new podcast on the Readiness Lab. Hey, if you want to host a show, if you thought you'd be a pretty good podcaster and you have some cool stories and you're really passionate about a certain topic, you should reach out. contact@thereadinesslab.com. And follow us on our stuff. We are announcing a a dynamic populations course at any time. So make sure you check out thereadinesslab.com/merch because you can sign up there as well. And see us for our next episode after you like and subscribe. Peace.